From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Sup?
If you got a tip for Melissa, an unsolved murder, an underreported crime spree, how to wash that man right out of your hair, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. She's like every other girl with big dreams, except hers usually involve police reports and blood spatter analysis. Melissa Morgan.
And more cowbell. My beloved producer, Mark, your intros are getting more prescient as time goes by. Some men you can't wash out of your hair, like this week's case, John List, and blood spatter analysis from the remarkable Dr. Henry Lee plays a part in this case.
I didn't know that.
Well, it's actually it's layered. I'm just going to call this one layered.
Ooh, I like layered.
Layered like baklava is the only thing I can think of. Yeah, layered, very layered. So,
okay.
Some men don't get out of your hair quickly. I found if you use baking soda, sometimes if you just put some baking soda in water when you're in the shower, you can get pretty much any guy out of your hair.
That would wash me right out.
Yeah.
Give me really bad eye burns.
It's very grainy. Oh no, it doesn't burn. You don't stick in your eyes, dummy. You just put it on your head. It's a clarifier. Girls will know what I'm talking about. You do not have to know because you're one of the boys that
that you want to wash right out of your hair.
Out of your hair. Yeah. So this case is layered personally and in reality. Not just layered for me. So imagine back, if you will. I know some of the listeners won't have even been thought of yet, may not have even been a little zygote, to 1985, where Melissa Ann Morgan is in college and cable is pretty new. I don't believe that I had access to MTV until 1981 or 1982. I can't remember, but I do remember when cable finally made its way to Kentucky. I was one of those kids that just never left looking at my television, and my eyes are spinning like those hypnotic things in circles. Big fan of anything, and I'm not visual at all, much more auditory. That's why I enjoy doing a podcast as opposed to a video cast, because I don't see. So, I see, I have great vision. I don't even wear glasses. Things are much better. They land in my cerebellum much easier if I can hear them. Sometimes seeing them is okay, but hearing is a big deal. But for me, I remember 1985 seeing this made-for-HBO telefilm and just as a younger person who's interested in true crime and murder, etc. This one was really interesting, and it felt to me like it was the most unique, original conceit ever written, and I couldn't believe it wasn't in the theaters. I couldn't believe it was just on HBO, but I thought this is the best goddamn thing HBO's ever made, and it is a movie called Blackout. You may have seen the posters for it or pictures for it because it's quite haunting. It's a man in a leather mask with a zipper over the mouth, like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction. I think it's Pulp Fiction.
That would be the one.
Yeah. So it's like I refer to it in shorthand as a Gimp mask. So, and very beautiful blue eyes staring at you, and those blue eyes were supposed to belong to Keith Carradine. Now, a shortened version of the story, Blackout, is I was so fascinated, as I typically am, by the details. The larger crime is an awful thing, but it's the details that matter to me. And this telefilm was filled with amazeballs details I was like, I've never heard of that. That is amazing. So this character kills, he's I think he was a realtor in his previous life. He kills his wife and children and sets them up. From how memory serves me, because it was so shocking, sets them up in like the downstairs family room of their home and puts birthday party hats on them, from what I remember. Sets them all up on the couch, kills his wife and like 3 kids. And I believe his wife was also pregnant. Puts birthday party hats on them, turns the air conditioner down as low as it can go, and turns on I believe classical music. They have one of those systems that runs through the house, like, that was made by New Tone, where you can hear, music. You can turn music on in every room in your house, or you can turn it off. It's like a whole home system of, audio, whatever. That was a big deal, I guess, in the 80s. And he leaves and is running away to start a new life. However, he runs into a problem. I believe he's hitchhiking and gets in a car with a man. And then they are involved in a terrible accident where the driver is dead and Keith Carradine's character is highly disfigured. And I believe he takes the identity of the man who died, and he has to have extensive plastic surgery, just completely disfigured. He looks like a completely different guy. Comes out looking like handsome Keith Carradine. So that he's got that.
Oh, so the original character that kills the family, it was played by a different actor?
I got to be honest, I don't remember. I don't know if he was wearing like the mask.
I see.
I think it was Keith Carradine, but then they wrap him up in bandages, and he's not really revealed until later. And I think that's part of the mystery.
I see.
Is that you don't know for sure if it's him, but you're pretty sure it's him, but you don't know it's him. And what happens is he is nursed back to health by Kathleen Quinlan, a beautiful actress, and there is a stalwart cop played by Richard Widmark, who is fabulous, who won't give up. And what I believe is he has retired and actually even comes out of retirement to chase the man he believes killed his wife and kids and started over. And now Alan Devlin, I just think it's hilarious that the character's last name is Devlin. He's only missing like a bifurcated tail and a pitchfork. He is Alan Devil, and he has this new life as a realtor. And his beautiful wife, who is a nurse, and he's, started over. It's been a long time. It's 30-something years, so I don't remember all the details, and I tried desperately to find it, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I'm sure I could probably watch it on YouTube. But it is, it got like really shitty ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, but, they can fucking take their produce and shove it up their assholes. Because when you're in college and you're scared shitless, it's a pretty fucking good thriller. In my mind, it's a pretty good thriller. The mask, it's very fascinating. So cut to having no clue that potentially the screenplay writer was influenced by a true life case. Finding out about John List was eye-opening, because I had never heard of anyone turning down, making air conditioning colder to preserve bodies so you can't tell the time of death, people turning heat up to help decompose a body. I'd never heard of someone having that much intelligence, forethought, brain power to plan something. So way back, 14 years earlier, John List incorporated that, and I don't even know how many people had air conditioning in the early 70s. I know we didn't, probably till the mid-70s. I remember sweating through most of my childhood till we got air conditioning, and then when we did, again, air conditioning plus cable equals Melissa never leaves the house. I don't even know how I got out. I don't know how I went to college.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, not having a box fan in my bedroom blowing on me as I prayed for the sweet release of death every night from, May through October in Kentucky was a lovely thing. Going to bed at night with air conditioning was like, oh, this must be what heaven is like. So I'm not saying for sure that Blackout is influenced by John List, but I'm pretty sure Blackout is influenced by John List. So John Emil List was born in September of 1925, and he is of German heritage. His parents were probably stern. He was a devout Lutheran, and he was in the military. He may have had a difficult childhood, although he did, take care of his mother in her dotage to a point when he decided that he wanted to get rid of everyone. So he's the only child of John Frederick List and Alma Maria Hubinger.
Don't ask me.
She's German. So, devout Lutheran. He was a Sunday school teacher. And in 1943, he enlists in the U.S. Army. And he serves in the infantry as a lab tech during World War II. So he's discharged in 1946. And he enrolls at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And he earns a bachelor's degree in business administration. And just remember this detail: a master's degree in accounting. A master's degree in accounting. And he's commissioned a second lieutenant because of his ROTC training. So in November of 1950, the Korean War escalates, and he is recalled to active military service. So he's recalled actually just in the States at Fort Eustis in Virginia, and he meets Helen Taylor, and she's the widow of an infantryman who was killed in action in Korea. And she lives nearby with her daughter, Brenda. So John and Helen get married in December of 1951 in Baltimore. And it's explained later that they get married in Baltimore because at that time that was a state that did not require a blood test. And it's later revealed in testimony that Helen told John she was pregnant. So she sort of trapped him into marriage, even though she already had the one daughter and she was a widow. I feel like she really knows how to pick him. But we'll find out that there's a mental reason why her picker may have been broken. So a really good reason why her picker may have been broken. So they get married in Baltimore, but they move to Northern California because he's, still in the Army, and he's listed as an accountant in the Army. An accountant. So his second tour is over in 1952, and he starts working for an accounting firm in Detroit. And he's an audit supervisor for a paper company in Kalamazoo. Try and imagine The Office with more murder. Like if Steve Carell were a murderer.
That's that's surprisingly not hard to do.
So they end up having 3 kids. So by 1959, he's risen to the general supervisor of the company's accounting department. But Helen is sort of spiraling downward as she does. She's an alcoholic, and again, we'll find out later. It's also sort of a cautionary tale on keeping secrets. Perhaps life is better if you have secrets that you are embarrassed about or think will cause people to look at you differently. Perhaps it's better to fucking let the secrets out and live your life and not stuff things in and kill people or ignore physical symptoms that are probably causing a lot of trouble. So she's very unstable. In 1960, her daughter from the first marriage gets married and leaves the household, probably at the age of 5 because she can't fucking stand living with Helen and John. So in 1960, John moves the rest of the household, his wife Helen and the 3 kids, to Rochester, New York, and he takes a job at Xerox, where he becomes the director of accounting services. Are you seeing a pattern here?
I have something about accounting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seems to be playing a part in the story.
Accounting. So in 1965, Xerox transfers him to Jersey City, New Jersey, and he ends up getting a job as the vice president and comptroller for a bank. And Helen and the kids move into a 19-room Victorian mansion that they call Breeze Knoll. His mother also moves in the upstairs mother-in-law attic is what they call it.
19 rooms?
19 rooms. It's quite, and there's details in this that are heartbreaking later on, including the destruction of a Tiffany skylight that was valued at about $100,000 in 1971.
Wow, this is the accounting game seems to pay okay.
Yeah, or perhaps he's living above his means, which we might.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is in 1965. They've moved to this Victorian mansion. The kids are now in their teens. There's Frederick is 13. John Jr. is 15, and Patricia is 16. And Helen's older daughter has moved out, probably to get away from the fucking weirdos. So I'm going to explain what he does on November 9th of 1971, and then go a little bit backward, explaining, his version of why he had to do it. So November 9th of 1971, he methodically murders his entire immediate family. He uses a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, and he uses his father's Colt .22 caliber revolver. So his kids are at school. He shoots his wife, Helen, in the back of the head. Then he shoots his mother, Alma, who's 84, above the left eye. His daughter, Patricia, comes home. He kills her. And then son Frederick comes home, and he shoots him. He shoots them both in the back of the head. He makes himself lunch. He drives to the bank where he had once worked. He closed his own account and his mother's account. And then he goes to his son John Jr.'s Westfield High School to watch him play a soccer game. And he drives John Jr. home. And then he shoots him repeatedly in the chest and face. Now he lines the...
Jesus Christ.
But what he does after, he's a fascinating monster. He lines them up in the ballroom of this 19-room Victorian mansion. He covers them with sleeping bags, which is one of the things that, of course, as a profiler now, they would say he is, remorseful, and killing your family, all of them, is, something you should probably be remorseful about. He left his mother upstairs in her apartment in the attic. He just left her in her rocking chair where he'd shot her. I guess he felt like that's where she, wanted to be, looking out at the yard. Oh, wait, she can't look anymore because he shot her right above the eye. He leaves a 5-page letter for his pastor. It's found on the desk in his study. He said that there's so much evil in the world. He had to kill his family to save their souls. He was afraid that his kids were going to start having sex. Says the guy who was lured into marrying Helen because he thought she was pregnant in the 50s. So...
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So 20 years later, oh, she wasn't pregnant, by the way. So 20 years later, he's like, my kids aren't going to have sex. I have to kill them first. So he felt he was really doing this to save their souls. He's a strong Lutheran. He cleans up the different crime scenes. He cuts his own picture out of every family photograph in the house, so he can't be identified easily.
Whoa.
Every picture cut out John's face.
He didn't just take the whole pictures with
Nope.
him. He had to cut his... Okay.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with old John.
No, he's a stellar human being. But when you find out what he does, it's amazing. He turns the air conditioning down real low. He turns the radio loudly to a religious station. Does it sound familiar, like the movie Blackout yet?
Just a little bit.
A little bit. So because of their lifestyle, which was very reclusive, they're literally not found for a month. It's December 7th, and that's when they're found. So they're reclusive. They don't socialize because, of course, they're very religious, and John doesn't want his kids to know anything about anyone else. He had methodically sent notes to the kids' schools, saying that, and any of their little part-time jobs they had, paper delivery, lawn mowing, stating that the family is visiting Helen's mother in North Carolina and they'll be gone for several weeks. So the schools aren't looking for the kids. The people where the kids work aren't looking for their employees because they're gone visiting Helen's mother. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know.
Is he not employed anymore at this point?
Well, I haven't got to that yet, darling. Oh. You'll see what he has done. He stopped the milk service, the mail, and the newspaper deliveries, and he had turned all the lights on in the house so that the house was illuminated day and night. When the neighbors started to wonder where they were, they would walk up to the door, hear the religious radio, and leave thinking someone was home. One by one, the lights start burning out. You know, there's no activity in the house. The light bulbs are burning out one at a time. So finally, the neighbors call the police. So John had been laid off from his job months before. And he would take the newspaper and go sit at the train station and read the newspaper during the day and come home at night at the time he was supposed to have come home. But that's because producer Mark had ruined the surprise.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I would have gotten there. But yes, that's, I mean, this is 1971, remember. You can disappear a lot. You know, back in 1971, you could kill your wife and go, oh, she RUNNOFT with a boy, with another boy.
Yeah, right. There are no surveillance cameras.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you could say whatever you want and people would believe you. It's 1971. It's like, oh, I guess she just left. Bye-bye. Nope, she didn't leave. His mother, and the 3 kids are dead in the house a month later with the air conditioning on really high. So it becomes the most notorious crime in New Jersey since the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. There's a huge manhunt. There's hundreds of leads. He's, destroyed all of the reliable photos of him. The only thing left is from, 20 years earlier when he was very young. The family car is found at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York, but there's no evidence that he'd boarded a flight at all. His mother is then flown to Michigan and interred at a Lutheran cemetery, and his wife and 3 kids were buried in a cemetery in Westfield where they were. Now, cut to, and producer Mark and I watched this, I'm guessing, as a rerun. I know I saw it, and I know I saw it with you, even though it had aired in 1989. It was still so fascinating. I'm sure they reran it. But 18 years later, May of 1989, the murders are recounted on the Fox television show America's Most Wanted. It has just started to air. It's a brand new show. John Walsh hosting America's Most Wanted. It was typically they would pick someone from the FBI's top 10, but sometimes they would air, stories of maybe people that were a little further down the list, but were still, wanted on the run. This is the part that is so fascinating. So there's a forensic reconstructionist, an artist named Frank Bender, who does age progression clay busts of people. Typically what he worked on were missing children. So if a child is gone a child is gone at the age of 5, they're going to look markedly different by 10 and much, much different by 15. And he's kind of amazing at age progression. But he's more than that. He is, whether he knows it or not, or whether he went to profiling school, he may just be phenomenal. He is a profiler, and he can get into the goddamn brains of someone who is an obsessive-compulsive Lutheran, who doesn't want people to know that there are secrets in his family, and he can tell you what kind of glasses John List wears 18 years later. So Frank Bender does an age-progressed bust of John List, and he goes through a box of glasses that they use, to put on these busts. And they interview Frank Bender, and he's like, these were too small. these were not the right ones. I looked and looked. He went to a thrift store and found the ones he was looking for that are large and square, and puts them on the bust. And less than 2 weeks later, John List is identified by a neighbor living in Virginia, now under the name Bob Clark, working as a, what do you think he works as?
Let me guess. Optometry. No, accounting.
As an accountant in Virginia. And he is wearing those same motherfucking glasses.
Okay, that's pretty amazing.
He is wearing the glasses that Frank Bender knew he would wear. He went and looked at his old pictures that were by now 30 years old or more, close to 40 years old. Pictures of him as a youngster with a full head of black hair and glasses. And knew that he would just have a few hairs on top of his head, which he did, hair around the sides, and these motherfucking big-ass square glasses because he said he was, a person of habit and ritual, and that he would not change. And it's amazing. His bust, it's like John List commissioned an artist to do this. It is so...
I'd never been aware of this, that there was anybody out there that did that kind of age progression in busts or whatever.
It's
where he takes the psychology of the subject into account.
I'm not sure that everyone... there are a lot of amazing forensic artists who do age progression and who do busts of people that are missing, and especially recreating when they found someone who's a Jane or a John Doe. There's a lot of amazing artists who do that. It's much easier now to do it digitally on a computer, but there are still people who have the old-fashioned artistic craft of doing this as a clay bust. But Frank Bender is kind of the rock star in my mind.
He would have to be.
Yeah, he's pretty amazeballs. So he denies that he is John List for the better part of a year. He finally admits it after a fingerprint from his old military file matches fingerprint. What he didn't do is wear gloves because it was his own house. But they, maybe it was on the gun or one of the bodies. But they figure out, and it's irrefutable, and they show him. So in 1971, the FBI discovers later that he had traveled by train from New Jersey to Michigan and then to Colorado. He lived in Denver in early 1972, and he took an accounting job, which, by the way, Frank Bender said he would also be working in accounting, and he was.
Because he's a creature of habit.
Mm-hmm. As Robert Peter Clark, just call him Bob. And he had taken that name from one of his college classmates. And the real Bob Clark says, I don't even know who the hell this guy was. I don't remember meeting him. I don't remember knowing him, but he took that name from a college classmate that he said he admired. So he, became Bob Clark. So from 79 to 86, he was the comptroller at a paper box manufacturing company outside Denver. He joined a Lutheran congregation. He ran a carpool for shut-in church members.
What a guy.
Yeah. And at one church meeting, he met an Army PX clerk named Dolores Miller and married her in 1985. In 1988, they moved to Midlothian, Virginia, and Bob Clark gets a job as an accountant.
Shocking.
An accountant. So June of 1989, literally not even 2 weeks, 10 days later after his episode appears on America's Most Wanted with his Frank Bender clay bust, he's arrested in Richmond at his accounting firm after a neighbor had watched the show and was like, well, that's not Bob, or it's not John List, that's Bob Clark. He lives next to me. He and his wife live next to me. Nope. She alerted the authorities, and he just for months was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I am not John List. My name is Bob Clark. I don't know what you're talking about at all. So he's extradited to New Jersey in late of 1989, And there was a fingerprint that from his military record that was found somewhere at the crime scene that they're not saying, but somewhere that proved it could only be the person who killed everyone. He finally confesses in 1990. So he holds out for a long time, but he finally confesses. So at his trial, he testified that he was faced with grave financial difficulties. He'd lost his job at the bank. He didn't want to humiliate his family and tell them they had no money. So he went to the train station and read newspapers until it was time to come home. He had skimmed money from his, mom's accounting to try and cover his mortgage. His marriage was a shambles. His wife was a mess. Not only is she an alcoholic, she refused to treat her physical symptoms, which turned out to be tertiary syphilis that she'd gotten from her first husband. And syphilis had been eating holes in her brain for 18 years.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So she's, apparently was a very attractive, upbeat woman, and just everything. Her health just progressively got worse until she was, psychotic. And it was finally in 1969 that physicians found everything that was wrong with her in just a general workup. And it had progressed so far, and her alcoholism had progressed so far. She was, transformed from a beautiful young woman to an unkempt, paranoid recluse. And she would frequently, tell John how horrible he was in bed and, disparage his sexual skills in front of the kids and even out in public. So he, wants to keep the fact that he's lost his job from his family. He doesn't want them. He said his only two options were killing them all or going on welfare. And he didn't want to subject them to welfare.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. An FBI profiler said that he, was obsessive compulsive. And a court-appointed psychiatrist said that this obsessive compulsive personality disorder would have given him only two solutions: welfare or kill his family and send their souls to, quote unquote, heaven. So the welfare, in his mind, was an unacceptable option because it would expose he and his family to ridicule and violate his authoritarian father figure teachings regarding care and protection of family members. Now, later on, Connie Chung, in an interview, Connie Chung says, why didn't you just kill yourself? After he says, I wish I'd never done that. I have regretted my action and prayed for forgiveness ever since. And she's like, why didn't you just kill yourself? And he said he thought suicide is a sin and would have barred him from heaven, and he hopes to reunite with his family one day.
Well, hold on.
No.
Excuse me? Back here in the back row, I have a question.
I'm sorry, yes, sir. Producer Mark in the back row?
Isn't murdering 5 people also a sin? Probably a worse one than killing yourself? Just asking.
It's not murder if you're protecting your family. Why are you so judgmental? You're very close-minded.
Okay, I'll sit down.
Thank you. Turn off your recorder. I don't want this brought back.
Click.
I don't want this brought back to haunt me. Yes, obviously, I don't know that if he had syphilis. I don't know, but so in April of 1990, he's convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder, and he completely denies any responsibility at his sentencing hearing. He just will not. He will not give it up. He says, I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding, and prayer. And the judge is like, yeah, you know what? Fuck you, John List. That ain't shit. That ain't nothing. And he says, John Emil List is without remorse and without honor. I think that's probably the part that hurt him the most. After 18 years, 5 months, and 22 days, it's now time for the voices of Helen, Alma, Patricia, Frederick, and John List Jr. to rise from the grave. So he gave him a sentence of 5 terms of life to be served consecutively. It's the maximum permissible penalty at the time in 1990 in New Jersey. So he files an appeal of his convictions on the grounds that his judgment was impaired by PTSD due to his military service. This is my favorite part. He argued that the letter he left behind at the crime scene for his pastor, basically a confession, was a confidential communication and inadmissible as evidence.
Right.
A federal appeals court rejected both arguments. Now, maybe because producer Mark has forced me to watch way too many fucking episodes of Law and Order, but a minister, a psychiatrist, the people in your life that you tell things to, although I'm sure he didn't really tell the truth to his pastor, he wanted to leave a letter for someone letting them know, why he did what he did. He didn't say, Helen had syphilis and had holes in her brain, so I had to fucking kill her. He was like, Pastor, I didn't have any money and I couldn't take care of my family and I want to see them all in heaven, so bang, bang. It's interesting to me what can be compelled to be answered in court. I don't know if they ever released the actual details of the letter, but they're calling it essentially a confession. So all of his appeals are rejected. So Connie Chung then interviews him in 2002, and he's like, I just want to see my family in heaven again, and I did what I thought was the right thing. I love the fact that she said, why didn't you just fucking kill yourself? I don't think she said fucking, but it just would make me so happy. Like, why didn't you just fucking kill yourself, asshole? You probably had some insurance, right? Something, maybe. They could have sold the house. You pile of poo. So he ends up dying in prison, complications of pneumonia at the age of 1982. At the age of 82 in March of 2008. And he's in a medical center, part of the jail medical center in Trenton, New Jersey. And when he dies, the Newark Star-Ledger calls him the boogeyman of Westfield. So now this is, disheartening piece of information. The beautiful 19-room mansion was destroyed not quite a year after the murders, about 10 months, August of 72. It's officially unsolved. It's destroyed by arson. Along with the house was the ballroom, which is where the bodies were laying out, a stained glass skylight that was signed Tiffany original worth $100,000. It's now, of course, would be worth over $600,000 in 2018. But a new house was built on the site in 1974. I hope they put a lot of salt on the ground to, and burn some sage to get the icky cooties out. So there have been a few movies, TV shows done about him. There's Judgment Day, the John List story. Guess who starred as John List? Robert Blake.
Okay, that's funny.
Foreshadowing! Wife killer. I mean, sorry, I don't know who killed Robert Blake's wife. Some stranger with a gun who happened to know they were at Vitello's.
I see him at, between takes. So what do you call this gun? What is? How do you use this?
Am I holding it right?
Am I holding it the right way?
Did I put it I'm blaming it toward me? Is that bad? Something like that. A 1987 film called The Stepfather. There was a 2009 remake. And believe it or not, the character of Kaiser Soze is based on John List from the movie The Usual Suspects.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I can't even. And no one's ever said that Blackout was influenced by the John List murder.
Oh, but come on.
I mean, I can't. Right.
I'd love to talk to the writer.
I would too.
Oh, by the way, I just found it on YouTube. We can watch it tonight if you want.
It's so... Well, look, I was in college and a scaredy cat, but hey, I still think it's scary. So one more odd tidbit. In 1972, List was listed as a possible suspect in the D.B. Cooper case. It's because of the timing of his disappearance 2 weeks prior to the hijacking of the airline. Multiple matches to the hijacker's description as far as the same slicked back hair, but the D.B. Cooper person was smaller and slight. He was shorter and slight. John List was a pretty big dude, but he was questioned by FBI investigators after he was captured, and he denied any involvement in the Cooper case.
Yeah, what at that point, why would he not admit it if he really was D.B. Cooper?
Right. There would be, unless God told him to, take the money and hijack the airline. Yeah. So his name is still occasionally mentioned, mostly just by, D.B. Cooper conspiracy theorists, but there's no direct evidence that implicates him, and the FBI doesn't consider him a suspect anymore. So in 2008, John Walsh, the host of America's Most Wanted, donated that amazing age-progressed bust of John List by Frank Bender to the National Museum of Crime and Punishment in Washington, D.C. And now, of course, that is defunct. But man,
I wonder where the bust is now.
I know. I would love to see it more than anything. I would love to go to that museum more than anything. So
I sense a birthday gift for Melissa.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to have to get online.
The bust of John List. All right, so just when you think it's over, it's not over. My beloved Blackout plays a part in a real murder.
Really?
So there's a real murder in 1971 of a family. There is a film that shows on HBO of the murder of a family. And there's a guy who has a family. And someone recommends the film Blackout to him at the video store. And a week later, Ed Sherman in Hartford, Connecticut, goes on a fishing trip with his friends. He is married to Ellen Sherman. They have a teenage daughter, and she is pregnant, much like Keith Carradine's wife in Blackout. And they have an open marriage for a while, and she, Ellen was fine with that. But he ends up having a mistress that he gets pregnant, Nancy Prescott, and they end up having a kid. Ellen is like, you can leave and take the boat and your mistress, and that's all you're going to get. And Ed's like, wait. Let's just try and fix this. We can fix this. So they stay together, and Ellen is pregnant. And Ed Sherman, is going to go on a boating trip with his friends. So on a Friday in August in 1985, about a week after he has seen Blackout, on a recommendation from a friend at the video store, he leaves on his trip with his 4 friends, a boating trip out in the ocean. And he makes a phone call. His friends all saw it. He uses a phone at a house near the marina. One of his friends lives close to the marina, and he calls his wife, Ellen. Hey, we're leaving. Going on the trip. See you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourself and the baby. Oh, yeah, I'm going to miss you. No, I won't drink too much beer. I like Cheetos, too, but no, I'll be good, I promise. So
just like that.
Just like, I'm guessing. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a good... Shut up. How about that?
No, that's good.
Thanks. I'm trying to figure out what a guy would say when he's leaving. So on Sunday, he gets a call on the boat's radio from the police. And they say, your wife has been murdered. She's discovered by your family friend who you asked to look in on her. And it looks like an intruder has come into the home and strangled the life out of his wife and made a hasty retreat, but not before turning the air conditioning on really low.
Hey, that sounds familiar.
It does. Doesn't that sound familiar? So here is where, not exactly blood spatter, but definitely a coroner. Who's the coroner for the state of Connecticut? Dr. Henry Lee. Blood spatter expert, Dr. Henry Lee. That's why when you said blood spatter in the intro, I was like, producer Mark doesn't even know that he's Kreskin. Henry Lee is stumped as to, Ed Sherman has an alibi. He has been on a boat since Friday. His wife was murdered on Sunday, the same day that his friend was asked to check in on her. She was strangled with her own underwear. It was obviously a sexual assault gone bad, and the person left, oddly turned on the air conditioning really low, and then, made a hasty retreat. So Dr. Lee takes some time after being stumped and is like, what the fuck is happening? What's happening here? It dawns on him that the ligature marks on Ellen's neck were made before the underwear was tied around her neck to make it look like she was strangled with her own underwear. She had been strangled before the panties went around her neck. And figuring out the temperature in the room, the forensics, she had been killed much earlier than Sunday. So who could have done that? Who would do this? Ed and Ellen were very happy. She's pregnant. He's on a fishing trip. It's a solid alibi. He's got 4 witnesses. He couldn't have done it. He couldn't be in 2 places at once, right?
Well,
a witness comes forward and says, I saw him at the video store and told him about Blackout. The movie is actually shown at his trial.
Really?
The movie Blackout is shown that this is what influenced him a week before he kills his wife. A little girl who we now know, they gave her the pseudonym of Jessica at the time. We now know her name is Kristen McDuff, came forward because the phone he used at his friend's house to call his wife, and all of his friends heard him talking to his wife. You know how kids are. Kids are, it's 1985. Kids are shitty. They pick up the phone and listen. They want to know what the adults are. They want to know what the adults are talking about.
Oh, that little shit. I tell you, they just fuck up everything, don't they?
That little shit, Kristen McDuff, said, well, Daddy, why was Ed talking to just the ringing tone? The phone was just ringing. And the phone was just ringing because he'd already killed Ellen. He'd already killed Ellen on Friday, left to go on his trip, called, knowing no one would answer. It made it sound real convincing. His friends were like, yeah, she was coming down on him, wouldn't get off his back about eating Cheetos and beer. And little Kristen McDuff was like, he wasn't talking to a person. It was just ringing. I heard it. I was listening to him talking to ringing.
Wow. Did she actually testify?
She did. Wow. That's why her pseudonym was Jessica. But now that she's an adult, she is Kristen McDuff. And she was like, everyone was scared that if he was found innocent, he would come back and kill me because I'm ostensibly the person that put him in jail. But that didn't happen because he was arrested and he was convicted. And the jurors were treated to, watching Blackout. And they were really interested to know more about the forensics, how they could prove. And Dr. Henry Lee was like, look, here's how he did it. He turned the air conditioning down. We thought she was killed on Sunday. She was actually killed on Friday because, her decomp was so thwarted by the cold in the house. So he is sentenced to 50 years in prison after being found guilty of first-degree murder. Now, he would never admit his guilt, and what's sexually bad is that he was only in prison for about 3 years before he died of a heart attack.
Oh, that's a shame.
But at least 3 years, he was not happy, and he died quite young after killing his wife and unborn child. And, I don't know if it's, never let the kids pick up the extension. It's not as easy now. Most people use a cell phone. But isn't it interesting the way life influences art, influences life?
I think so, yes.
So John List, no matter what he did, influenced a really fascinating film, and a really fascinating film influenced by John List influenced a really shitty guy. And they all could have got away with it if it weren't for those damn kids. And more cowbell.
And hey kids, put down that phone. Stop listening to your parents. Send in a tip. jttipsters@gmail.com or call us at 832-847-7837. That's 832-TIPSTER.